What is the number one deterrent to recovery? What would your answer be? Years ago, I ran marathons. I know it's probably difficult to believe that looking at me today. But my efforts to answer that question, what's the biggest deterrent to recovery, reminded me of those days of running marathons. One race in particular came to mind from the early 80s. Up to that point, my best pace had been 7 minutes a mile. However, once that gun fired and the race began, I was swept along by that crowd. It was like I was being carried by the other runners. Instead of running 7 minutes a mile, which is the best I'd done to that point, I was actually running at 6 minutes and 15 seconds a mile. To say the least, I was shocked when the timer called out 1 hour and 15 minutes at the 10-mile mark. I was even more surprised at the 20-mile mark when the timer called out that it was 2 hours and 30 minutes. We won't talk about the last 6 miles, but what I experienced that day was one of the key ingredients to recovery. On my own, I could have never run at a 6 hour and 15 minute pace. But the power of the crowd around me, the community, allowed me to accomplish what I could have never done by myself. The answer to that question, what's the number one deterrent to recovery, is loneliness and isolation. It's a natural response from the shame that occurs after betrayal for both parties to want to isolate. Studies have shown that isolating, being disconnected, will increase your risk of heart attack by 29% and your risk of stroke by 32%. Literally, being disconnected from others is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. In 12-step work, if someone is struggling, do you know what they will tell participants? Go to a meeting. If someone is depressed, they'll say, go to a meeting. If someone doesn't know what to do or they're confused, they'll say, go to a meeting. I believe that the founders of 12-step discovered this reality early on, that it was community that helped those individuals begin to emotionally regulate, to get a hold of themselves. It wasn't more information, it was being part of a group. In the past 10 years, research has shown that community is as important a nutrient to our brain as nutrient-rich foods are to our body. Literally, we need to be in community. This week's newsletter goes on into far more detail than I'm going to cover here, but I promise you what makes recovery possible, what really speeds us along, is being in a community where our brains can draw from those around us. I'm sure many of you panic when you hear me say that it's really important for both of you to be a part of a healthy community because it feels like a huge risk. But risk is not the downside of recovery. Risk is the foundation of your recovery. Denis Proffitt's research provides a great illustration of the importance of community and load sharing. Just having others around who can carry you along, where we can draw from that resource of people who are like us. In his research, participants were divided into two groups. One group without a heavy backpack and the other with a heavy backpack. Both groups were placed at the base of a hill and asked to estimate the slant of that hill. Donning a heavy backpack made those hills look steeper and farther away. The group with the backpack literally overestimated the incline by 15 to 20 degrees. They judged a 5-degree hill to be 20 degrees and a 10-degree hill to be 30 degrees. Our brains, in many ways, are nothing more than budgeting machines that predict and allocate resources for our survival. Because if we don't take in more energy than we expend, then we can't survive. It's not that our brains are lazy. Well, maybe they are. But they will certainly overestimate the difficulty of a task if you're doing it by yourself, because they don't want us to overextend what we can do. But when those same participants with that backpack stood next to a friend also wearing a backpack, guess what happened? They no longer overestimated the slant of the hill. And recovery is so much like trying to judge the slant of a hill in front of you. Our brains will naturally overestimate the difficulty. However, when you get into a group, it suddenly seems more doable. I can't tell you how many times there are meetings I needed to attend, such as a recovery meeting, a conference, a spiritual gathering, some sort of event that was being held at work. And I dreaded going. I just thought it is not going to be worth it. But I also can't remember a single time after going that I didn't feel better. And I bet the same is true for you. Just think about how many times you didn't want to do something, then you did it, and it was better than you thought. This is why a fair recovery is community-based. We've learned that people will do far better when they are embedded with their people who are like them, who are doing the journey with them. Because inside that community, when you're embedded in there, you're far more capable of accomplishing what you want. While reading books and articles is useful, it doesn't promote community. It can even lead to avoidance and more isolation. Healing will occur, however, when you're part of community, when you're on that journey. And like that marathon, stay connected, please, to healing.